Okay.
Oh, Anne MacDonald's in the waiting room. Anne's a barefooter who lives in Scotland.
Oh, that's good. We're in good company then. Love it. Okay, so welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us this evening. You're giving up your time to come and join us. We're moving out of lockdown in some parts of the world, so we're especially grateful. So thank you. Welcome to those that are joining us for the first time. It's great to have you here, and we hope we'll see you again. And also welcome and thank you to our regular attendees. So what I'd like to do is just run through a few kind of housekeeping details, as it were. So the code of conduct that we follow is basically just to be respectful to one another. So if I can ask you to bear that in mind in all of your interactions with each other this evening, that would be gratefully received. We will have a Q&A functionality within this meetup tonight. So some of you have used it already to tell us where you're from. So please feel free to pose any questions to Kim, and we will get to those questions throughout the session. So let me just get into a few things. So I'd love to welcome Kim this evening. Kim is really special and dear to me in that I've followed her work for a long time. I've attended the Barefoot coaching program, the top modules working through to the postgrad. So I am testament to what Kim's company delivers and brings. The work that Kim has done over the years, an accomplished author. The Coach's Survival Guide and the Casebook with Jeff Watts. And not only that, Kim is a master coach through the International Coaching Federation. And I've mentioned she's the CEO of the Barefoot Coaching Academy. So without further ado, I welcome Kim Morgan to our Zoom room. I would usually say the stage, but to Zoom. So Kim, I will pass over to you.
Thank you, Nikki, Sath, Donald. It's great to be here. And so I'm seeing so many familiar faces, which is at the same time wonderful and daunting, because the familiar faces are people who have already trained with me and probably heard what I'm going to say 100 times over. So apologies if it's old hats. But it's still lovely to be here with so many people giving up their Wednesday night to come and think about coaching. So we have a slide show. I'm not actually managing the slideshow because when I started doing it, it was technically very complicated, but I haven't loaded the correct fonts on my laptop. So Christine, my digital marketing exec from Barefoot, is doing the slides for me. So do apologise if I'm making hand signals or giving a dodgy winks or just saying, Christine, next slide, please. We've got an hour and a half and it's going to be a canter through lots of underpinning ideas about coaching and ending with some practical takeaways for you that I hope you can apply immediately if you're not already a coach in your life, in your teams, in your business, in your relationships. My mission has always been to make coaching available to all and to distill complex ideas into very manageable concepts that you can use to make your lives better. You all said where you came from. I'm actually in Leicestershire as I speak to you, but those of you who are good with accents will know that I'm from Essex, East London by origin. And I've always compared my aspirations with those of Jamie Oliver, a fellow Essex boy who took kind of cordon bleu cooking and made it available to people who couldn't always access it. So that's how I see coaching. So this is not highbrow, this is not academic, it's real hands-on. This is what you can do with this. And I call it the hard stuff, not the soft stuff, the psychology of coaching, because it is, you know, for years and years, people have said it's soft, it's fluffy, do tree hugging. Less so now, but believe it or not, we still hear that sometimes. But actually, it takes energy, it takes effort, it takes courage to engage with the psychological, the emotional aspects of running a business or dealing with a team or just being in a relationship, actually. So that's the context. Chris, they need a bolt if anyone's old enough to remember that. No, they're not. I'm talking to the wrong audience here. So this is just a picture of our offices simply because we moved into them about 2 days before we locked down. And nobody's been there or seen them, and I'm very proud of them. So there you are. That is the HQ of Barefoot, and that's a picture of me before lockdown as well. Okay, Chris, let's move on. Thank you. For those of you who haven't done the course, we have been teaching, or I have been teaching, an ICF accredited, also postgraduate certificate in business and personal coaching for nearly 25 years now. And we've trained over 4,000 coaches. And the focus has always been on transformation rather than transactional work. The focus is on the psychology of change and human motivation and how coaching can galvanize that. So that's what this session is about. Sorry, Chris, next slide. We're going to begin with looking at the psychology of change and how people motivate themselves, which informs the coaching approach. And then, as I said, a few foundation techniques for you to take away that you can use. Everything here you can use with teams. If I forget to keep saying that, remember that. The creative tools and techniques are fantastic for teams or even organizations as well. So the context is, and I think Peter Drucker once said this, that most leadership experts agree that psychology is not taught enough to leaders and managers. And I think we probably all know this, that people get promoted to leadership positions because they're technically good, not because they understand how to manage people, and even less because they don't understand how to engage with people's psychology or motivation or deal with the kind of emotional aspects of people, and they need to learn it. So knowing how to manage stress, knowing how to manage anxiety and how to motivate people are areas where the kind of science-based knowledge that underpins coaching can make leaders and managers really effective. It makes the difference. So I really like to think that coaching is applied psychology. We have so many people who come on our programs who say, you know what, I'm 50 or 40 or, you know, they're in the middle of their lives. And it's a usual story that they say, I always wanted to do psychology when I went to university. I was always interested in psychology, but my mum, dad, teacher wouldn't let me. And now they've come back to it. And some people who did study psychology, and there may be some of you here who did, say, yeah, I understand. I did study psychology, but I didn't know what to do with it. And I think coaching is the perfect vehicle for applying some psychological theories. A really good example of skilled and qualified managers, leaders, team leaders coming and training as coaches are is the Agile and Scrum community. I wrote the first book with Jeff Watts, who's a Scrum Master, who many of you may know. And Jeff was the first person ever to come from the Agile community and say to me, you know, we know so much about change, but actually, if the people aren't on board, that change is not going to happen, and we need to learn some coaching. And since Jeff first came on the program, we have had hundreds. We have a whole subculture of Agile coaches and Scrum Masters on the course. So yes, you know, building on what I've said, your leadership style makes a difference to performance. This work comes from Marcus Buckingham and a book called Leadership That Gets Results. And they reckoned, they studied, they researched that actually how happy, how engaged people feel at work, how the climate is in a team or an organization is directly impacted by their immediate manager's style. So much so that it has a contribution of 70% towards how people are feeling at work. And when there are surveys about why people leave work, it turns out that they leave managers, not companies usually. The Saratoga Institute did research over about 20 years with 60,000 exit interviews, and 80% of them were directly related to people's relationships with their boss. And Gallup too, I think they interviewed close to 1 million people, and the number one reason for leaving was bad boss. The thing that makes a better boss is having some coaching skills. And if there is a boss with some coaching skills, engagement and climate in the team tends to be better. And if engagement and climate in the team is better, performance can improve as much as 30%. And conversely, without that, it can drop by 30%. So this is a real business case for the soft stuff. When people feel good at work, their performance improves. It's not rocket science. And one thing that makes people feel good at work is having a coaching style of leadership. So I'm going to talk to you now about some of those aspects of a coaching style of leadership and some of the things that make people motivated or not so motivated. So Christine, thank you. First of all, praise and recognition. They are really, really basic human needs. And when we go to work, we sometimes forget about it. Again, I'm going to give you a few studies. 2013, some time ago, a big survey asking people would they rather have more praise and appreciation or a 5% pay rise. And 83% of people went for the more praise and appreciation. 90% of people said a fun work environment motivated them. I wonder how that's changed at the moment, actually. Now people are working from home. I'd love to see studies coming out about that. And we know from psychology that the recommended ratio of praise to criticism in any relationship is 5 to 1 over a period of time. It's not like the feedback sandwich. You don't have to say 5 praising things and then 1 critical thing, but over a period of time in any relationship, home, parent to child, work, that should be the balance. Research has recently shown that we can take as much as 20 to 1, a ratio of 20 to 1, without starting to feel suspicious or nauseated, actually. So one of the things that we do in coaching is authentically praise, and the key is authentically. Okay, I'm going to carry on, Chris. And the next one, thank you. So some thoughts about change and motivation, and why telling doesn't work and why teaching doesn't necessarily work, and by giving people new skills doesn't necessarily work, or saying, look at me and see what I do. It's difficult and it's complex to change, even to change things we want to change. We have all sorts of emotional, physical, psychological, historical, cognitive, familial, neurophysiological conditioning, all keeping us in familiar patterns of behaviours. We have hardwired neural pathways from long ago that keep us doing things the way we've always done them. And interestingly, we do as individuals, but I also see this pervading into organisations too. Organisations have their own kind of neural pathways. I put here not a picture of my kitchen. I wish. It doesn't look nearly that tidy or slick. But the reason I put it there is because there's a bin, like the bin that I've got in my kitchen. And I had a kind of eureka moment. I had a Isaac Newton moment where that apple fell on my head, but instead it was me having moved the kitchen bin. And I moved the kitchen bin one day because, you know, when you move into a house, I think it's really crazy that you move into a house on a day, and on that day you decide where everything's going to be, and then it stays there for a very long time. And so one day I thought, why on earth did we put the bin there? It's not the obvious place to put it. I'm going to move it. So I moved it to the obvious place, which was nearer to where, you know, where I was cutting things on the worktop. And I went to put the peelings in the bin, and I walked over to where the bin used to be. And I did that kind of, oh, for goodness sake, I've moved the bin, I'm going there. The point was I probably did it for a month, I think. And I remember thinking to myself, my goodness, what about my clients? You know, this is a change that is pretty insignificant. This is a change that I have chosen to make. It's a change that I can see on a daily basis. And yet, over and over again, I went back to where it was. And I began to realise the complexity of supporting people to sustained behaviour change. So, some examples, because it's an area I'm really, really interested in. I'm fascinated particularly by people who profess. Thanks, Cameron. I like that story about the cutlery drawer. People who actually really desperately want to change and maybe do and then revert. And here are some examples, real life examples. Gastric band patients, people who were so desperate that they underwent surgery to lose weight, and were filmed actually a couple of days after the surgery whilst they were still in hospital recovering, and they were filmed phoning for pizzas. There's a lot of evidence about lottery winners who go about losing all their winnings. And shocking research that half to a third of Americans who are on maintenance medications who understand why they're on them don't take them. I've done work over the years with physiotherapists who say they're working with people with life-threatening conditions who simply have to remember to do their exercises every day, and they don't. And they've asked me to teach them some coaching skills or NLP skills to help embed that change. And maybe some of you have even seen this. It always shocks me when I've visited people in hospital. I've seen people who are looking really ill outside the hospital doors, dragging a mobile drip thing with them, in the cold, smoking a fag, going to great lengths to, feed that addiction. And not just an addiction to nicotine, but an addiction to things being the same. And generally in work, there is an inherent assumption that personal change can be skills-based, that people can be taught it. And they can be taught. And they sometimes, continue the change and continue the new learning, but sometimes they don't. And what's interesting in coaching is identifying that invisible and inbuilt immunity to change. So transactional coaching is probably just about, let's get a plan. You need to manage your diary better. Well, what can you do? I could say no to more things. I could set some boundaries. I'll make a list of urgent, essential, not urgent. It for the most part, it doesn't work. I'm walking proof that it doesn't. I've probably had over the years any number of consultants, business people doing exactly that, and I still keep working. I still keep working on Wednesday nights doing talks to people, which I enjoy. But it's really about getting curious and inquiring, what is it? Recently, I read there's a study by Susie Orbach, who is a woman who's an expert on weights, women and their weights. And she said there's a 97% recidivism rate for people who have lost weight in a structured way. 97% go back. So I want to keep on with this theme, because this is where this is kind of where the magic happens. This is where the curiosity has to be. So let's look, by contrast, when does change happen? And I am very wedded to the work of, his name was David Mezirov, but he was known as Jack. And he was a pioneer of transformational learning and adult learning and how change happens in adults. And he talked about, he identified the following times when we change. When we experience a disorienting dilemma, when something smacks us in the face, we often go, my goodness. An example from my life is, haven't driven so much in the last year, but prior to this year, I drove loads all over the country, like many of us did, and got a bit blasé, really. Got quite good at putting my lipstick on in the rear view mirror and just taking a few chances. I'm not proud of it, but it's the truth. And I had an accident. I had a really nasty accident. Thank goodness I wasn't badly hurt, and neither was the other person, but both cars were written off. And in that moment, I had that realization that just went ding, 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 one after another. My goodness, I am never going to do that again. I really learned in that moment. I had a instantaneously transformational moment. And for a long time, I had my hands at 10 to 2 and I didn't take any chances. And then gradually, I started to slip back again. I never got back to putting on my lipstick while I'm driving. I just need to say that in case there are any police officers on this course. I'm telling you this because this is knowing this feeds into how you coach people, because coaches will artificially kind of create these moments, states of puzzlement, disorienting dilemmas, the recognition that others share our feelings, so that we can harness when change naturally happens in our coaching sessions. So yeah, state of puzzlement, a similar one. Sorry, Chris, I haven't quite finished that. He also looked, Mesirov, at when don't we change? When don't we change? And we don't change when we are in a state of what he called non-learning. And non-learning is when everything every day is how we expect it to be. When we just get into a kind of Groundhog Day situation. And there's a lesson there for those of us who run businesses or run teams or work in organizations, to prevent that kind of non-learning happening. He also called the person who can bring about change in others an empathetic provocateur. And I think that's such a better name than coach, because that's what we do. We provoke with compassion. So what else do we need to know about our behaviours and our motivation and our psychology? Well, the next thing, Chris, is that Sigmund Freud said this such a long time ago, but it was so true. You know, if you imagine that iceberg, you imagine what you see, our behaviours above the surface of the water, and underneath that iceberg sit all our fears and all our beliefs and all our assumptions that we've collected through life. And it's those that drive our behaviours. And so approaching change from a behavioural level is rarely successful. We need to dig down to see what sits behind that behaviour in terms of beliefs and attachments to other things that are more important. So here we go. Barefooters know this well. So again, apologies for the repetition of it, but in a way, I think you can never know things. You can never hear this stuff enough. So this is a barefoot, very quick equation for how we develop beliefs about ourselves, others, and the world around us. And it's not a therapy session. It's not our parents did everything wrong session. It's not I'm a parent and I'm doing everything wrong session. This is just something that happens to all of us. And the reason that it happens is because we are young and suggestible. And we've got absolutely no way when we're young of determining whether what we're being told is right or wrong. We have no reference points or experience. So things that people say to us, we just accept, particularly if they are, in our eyes, an authority figure. And that may be a parent or a caregiver, it may be a teacher, it may even be a boss in the early stages of our career. It may be a brother or sister or another kid in the playground who's a bit more powerful than us. And if they tell us something about us or the world at large, that elicits in us a powerful emotional response, either positive or negative, it can really, really burn its way into our brains. And the things that are kind of delivered to us, the messages that are delivered, come under the following three categories. It can be one defining moment, one moment when we feel something either really wonderfully positive, like a moment when we win the race at school and we see all the people we love clapping their hands and telling us that we're wonderful. And that message that you're wonderful and you're great at what you do will be burned into your memory for a long time. Equally, if it's not such a positive thing, that will be too. And both of those things are true. Either the positive or negative messages can be delivered by repetition or by osmosis. We can catch them from those around us. We can catch a world view. People aren't to be trusted. You know, the world's a dangerous place. You can have parents who are very, as I did, very lovely, but very people-pleasing. And you can catch the message, I mustn't upset people. So, you know, this happens. This happens. And there was never a better example of it happening, of how it happens, than perhaps an experiment by an American psychologist called Professor Rosenthal. And he conducted what he called was the late bloomers experiment. And the late bloomers experiment was where he took the mid-range children in classrooms, not the high achievers, not the ones that were struggling. He took the mid-range children, said to the schools, give me the mid-range children. And I will tell you after an hour or so with them, which ones are going to be the late bloomers and which ones just aren't ever going to make it. So he did it over and over again, and he identified kids. And sure enough, miraculously, they did. They excelled. They started to really believe in themselves. And after a time, the school said, will you please tell us how to do that? And he said to just pick them at random. Because by picking them at random, yeah, their teachers start to look for something else in them, and they see it, and then they tell their parents, and the parents start to look for something else in them, and they see it, and then the children start to see that possibility in themselves too. When we meet senior board level directors in the coaching room, they come with this stuff, and it's usually they don't need consultants to tell them how to be a CFO. They need somebody to help them revisit the unhelpful beliefs that they've been carrying around with them. And if I could tell you my coaching room day after day after day, it's full of people feeling like a fraud, feeling like an imposter, feeling like they're going to get caught out, despite the fact that outwardly they are achieving. So the idea to those of us working in the field of coaching is not unusual. The idea that we might stop and reevaluate some of those hard-held beliefs that we've had throughout our life. But to the rest of the world, it's still totally a new thought. And if you can give that to people, it's wonderful to just start questioning. I'm just going to go through the next couple of slides, and then I want to stop for a minute. So just to reinforce this belief formation and the sense of high emotion, neuroscience has completely confirmed that we remember life's important moments well because they have high emotion attached to them, and high emotion leaves strong traces on our brain. So there's another message for all of us. If we want to embed a positive message, We need to accompany it with emotion. If we're giving people positive feedback at work, it's probably not going to work if we just go, oh, by the way, you did really well at that. But if you want them to remember it and you want them to build on it, you make it memorable. And the next slide is about how we find what we look for. So this thing called the reticular activating system, sometimes known as the RAS, is a function of our brain that controls our levels of consciousness, whether we are conscious or unconscious, but it also controls what we are conscious of. And it kind of acts as a filter. So if we have something in our conscious awareness, our reticular activating system will constantly seek to draw our attention to it. The primary example of that you've probably all heard is if you buy a new car. You've chosen this car really carefully. You wanted a new black Mini with go faster stripes, and you've chosen it really carefully because you've hardly seen any. Then you get out, you're on the M1 and they're everywhere. And you just notice them. They've always been there. They just weren't in your conscious awareness. And by the same token, we delete and we distort information that doesn't fit the beliefs that we have. So somebody telling you, you're great, you will delete it. But somebody doing more subtle coaching to show you how you're great will become embedded. And the way that we do that is we ask questions. We ask questions that redirect where our attention is going. We ask, when doesn't this happen to you? What are the exceptions to these things? Okay, I've seen a few questions coming in. What I'm working up to is telling you how you actually put all this into use as coaches. But I really wanted you to start to see that there's a reason why we don't just tell people what to do, because it's damn hard to crack this code. So shall we have a few questions, Sath?
Yeah, Kim, sure, yeah. Got a lot of great questions actually. I'm not gonna scroll back up this time. I'm just gonna be lazy and start with the most recent one, and we can work back the way. So great question here. How do you recommend people find their coaching niche, particularly if they are changing career?
Okay, so I'm going to plug my book, because there's a whole chapter on it in my book. Also, I've done a webinar on it, and I think maybe we've still got a copy of it, which I could happily share if Christine could sort that out. But the short answer is I don't recommend you go out hunting for a niche. I recommend that you let it find you. I recommend that it is something that you care desperately about, and something in which you have already a level of credibility, and you don't need a niche. That's what I want to say to coaches. They're all like, oh, I haven't got a niche. You don't need one. You can just be a coach until the niche finds you.
I found that useful. You got time for another quick one?
Yeah.
So this one's from Roddy. I've got a view on this, but you're the expert. Is it possible to coach your boss? It seems like a good way to upset them even when your motive is positive.
Only if you have a clear contract that you're going to do that. I'm really a fan of kind of reverse mentoring and reverse coaching. I worked with the police force once where new recruits were coaching the chief constables, and it was beautiful work. So I think it's a great idea, but you absolutely can't do coaching your boss by stealth. But if you're on a coaching course, for example, it's a great opportunity to say, oh, I'm on a coaching course, I need some practice, boss. Try that.
That's a good one. Right, I'll hold off any more for now, unless you want another. Do you like another one, or do you want
Let's
to keep...
do one more, and
Let's
then
do
we'll
one.
press on.
Let me scroll up a bit. I did see a few. Spot one here. There we go. How do you coach a team member who is not consistent with project engagement and it affects the overall performance? Sometimes high on involvement in projects, sometimes low, get too distracted.
Okay, so I'd like to think that by the end of this session, you might have a few ideas about that. But I think the main message that I'm giving here today is look what's underneath the behaviour. So as long as they have owned that level of distraction or lack of engagement, to start asking them some really interesting questions about maybe what are they assuming about this team, or what are they assuming about their part in the team that's stopping them. And I'm going to move on to to looking at how people motivate themselves differently. So that hopefully that will answer that question.
Oh, great.
Thank you. So shall we carry on, Chris, with just a couple more bits of information that coaches need? So one thing that we need to understand is the impact of stress on us. A healthy amount of stress keeps us focused and energetic and motivated, but too much stress is really damaging. I think we all know that now. At work, the reasons for stress can be many: uncertainty, fear, long hours, pressure to meet rising expectations, pressure to work at optimum levels all the time. And in the last year, there have been many additional pressures added in. When we are stressed, we go into the threat response. And the threat response is no different today from what it was, when we were roaming the prairies as cave dwellers. Our body responds in exactly the same way. And the main thing that happens from an intellectual perspective is that our IQ can drop as much as 20 points. And a drop of 20 points, if you've got an average IQ, can take you, pretty quickly to imbecile status, actually. We probably all know that when we are stressed and we can't find our car keys and we don't know what we're doing. But, that is a very everyday manifestation of it. When we're really stressed, we literally cannot think. We go into, a fight or flight, do or die. We go into black and white, all or nothing thinking. Absolutely not a chance of blue sky thinking in a team meeting when we're stressed. No ability to generate alternatives, a completely closed mindset, and a win or lose mentality. Expecting people to even be coached when they're stressed is quite impossible. So what we need to do, thanks Chris, next slide, is get people into a competency mode rather than survival mode. Notice the people around you that you're working with, and the quickest way to move them into survival mode is to give them some attention. because attention does the exact opposite. Attention means here, for our purposes, looking at them, listening to them without interruption, asking them how they are, or asking them, what's going on for them, what they would like to say, and just sitting back and listening, giving them time to think, giving them the gift of time, which can be as short as 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, and it can make an enormous difference. When we have attention from another human being, our brain does just the reverse. It now floods with stress-reducing chemicals. Neuroscientists who've been looking at this work, I'm going to introduce you to the work of Nancy Klein in a moment, who is the person who talks mostly about time to think in her book. Neuroscientists have been working with her and have said that when people are listened to in that way, the areas of their brain that are activated are the same ones that are activated when we are in love. And often when people are listened to in that way, they say they form an intimacy and a connection with people in a way that they haven't before. So we can really quickly bring people into a more competent and creative state, because these chemicals, these endorphins that flood our system, actually do the opposite of the stress ones, which shut us down into black and white, all or nothing thinking, and this time open up and really ignite our thinking so we can be creative and generate new ideas. It really, really works. So how does it work? I want to just tell you a little bit about how, sorry, Chris, can I just stay on the other slide for a moment? How it works is that we, in a team, for example, in a team meeting, we introduce the idea. People need to get a bit comfortable with it. It just seemed a bit odd for a while because we're used to fighting for airtime. But actually, if you say everybody is going to have 3 minutes or 5 minutes around this table or around this Zoom room to just know that they're not going to be interrupted and to be listened to with the full attention of everybody else, wonderful things happen. One, people who don't normally get heard get their fair crack of speaking. It evens out the kind of quiet people and the loud people in the room. There's really quality in it. Secondly, there's a generative effect. And one person's thinking, because you're not allowed to interrupt, will knock onto your thinking and so on around the room. It's incredibly simple. Had we had a smaller group, I really would have done this here. But I really would encourage you to go away and just try it. Try it one-on-one, listening to people in your team. Get over the embarrassment and we don't normally do this sort of stuff. And at every single exec board I work with, we start with this. And most of them, lots of people are saying the technique really works in the chat. Most exec boards want to return to this time and time again every time they come together. In our team at work, when we adopt this process, because very often we are just a normal team, not a coaching team. We don't all sit around coaching each other all the time and we get lost in the usual work stuff. When we stop and take 5 minutes to listen to one another, we probably learn more in 5 minutes of someone having uninterrupted time to think than we've learnt about one another in the previous 2 weeks. If you take one thing away from here, with courage back in your teams, introduce the time to think process. 5 minutes a person round the table, or 5 minutes in pairs, thinking about whatever you want to without interruption. Thanks, Chris. The other thing that's important to underpin what we do as coaches is this understanding that we are more likely to do something if we own it, if we give birth to that idea, if it fits our values, our beliefs, the way we want to do it. And there was a really fantastic piece of work done by Robert Cialdini, who's a psychologist, who's written a really great book called Influence, by the way. And he was asked by GP surgeries in Bedfordshire, what could they do to reduce no-shows? Because they were wasting, apparently that NHS was wasting 700, Donald, you might know this better than I do, but they estimated a loss of £700 million a year from 6 million appointments where people didn't show up. So they brought in this guy, he's a big shot, a psychologist, and he went there and he looked at the surgery and he watched what they did, and he came up with just a couple of simple changes that led to a 30% improvement in people attending. And they were simply the following. The first one he did was he changed a little sort of message that was going across that said how many people didn't attend last month. There were this many wasted appointments. And his thinking behind changing it to a positive, this many people did attend, was that by saying how many people didn't attend was kind of normalizing non-attendance for people. So they were like, oh, well, if that many people didn't attend, what's another one? So he did that. But then more importantly, instead of the receptionist just going, oh, there's your appointment. Sorry, I've just seen Stuart saying I'm slightly fixated that Chris is actually Chris Whitty and I'm Jonathan Van Tam. The two other simple things he did was he got people to actually write down their own appointment, or I guess, you know, maybe put it in their phone, but they had to make that commitment themselves. And they then made a verbal commitment that if they weren't going to be able to make it, they would let them know. And it led to, you know, a real change. So allowing people to make their own commitments is also something that we do in coaching. It absolutely is. And we get people to own something and come up with their own answers by asking questions. We ask all the time, who, what, when, where, how. Our questions really set the stage for our thinking, and those questions activate that internal search engine, the reticular activating system. So I think, you know, the last slide about what's going on with us all in terms of why we don't change as easily as perhaps we think we could are many things, many obstacles to change. And all this desire to change sits between a desired state and an actual state, where we are and where we want to be. And, you know, the coach says, you know, if I say I want to be fit and active and a stone lighter, what's the reality? I sit and drink wine on the sofa and watch TV. Okay, So like, what's in that gap? What is in that gap is the question. Some of it is what's known as homeostasis, and that is the term for a system's tendency to self-regulate, like our temperature. Whether it's cold outside or hot outside, our temperature will return to the status quo. And so do teams, and so do businesses and organizations. You know, we go in as change agents, and actually the homeostatic force kicks in after a while. That's why you need to keep shaking yourself up and reminding yourself. It's sometimes called self-consistency theory in human beings. A psychologist called Prescott Leckey coined that term, about people forming an identity, a sense of self early on. And whatever, you know, I'm a, you know, the lottery winners, I'm just a person who doesn't have money, or I'm a person who's always carried a lot of weight, or and the challenge to our identity of who we really are. It manifests itself in people even saying things, I don't know who I am anymore. This isn't me. This isn't me, the person with all the money, or the slim person. And so the coach needs to work at that level too. And companies and teams need to work at that level too, like to keep challenging that return. I'm sure all of those that you who are Scrum Masters and Agile coaches understand that needs to challenge that return to homeostasis. It can simply be habit or established neural pathways. It can be beliefs, assumptions, lack of confidence. It can often be looking at secondary gain, the payoff to the current behaviours. So what do I get from smoking? People often say, I work with someone who smoked, and I really looked at the secondary gain that she got for smoking. And it was, she was a really conventional, middle-aged, middle-class woman. And she said, I'm so damn boring, it kind of makes me a bit dangerous to smoke. Now, how like mad is that? She was totally putting her health at risk. And so we simply worked together to find other less harmful ways that she could get the same payoff. And she just had a crazy haircut, I think. But it wasn't until we looked at, what are you getting from this behavior? What's the payoff to you? What's it giving you? Because you probably wouldn't keep doing it otherwise. Sometimes it's a hierarchy of values that where people make a deal with themselves, because one value in that hierarchy comes out higher than another. I remember someone I worked with, a guy I worked with who had a really strong regional accent and became a director of quite a posh company and felt really out of place, decided to go for elocution classes. But actually, when he went home, his whole family took the mickey out of him terribly. And he didn't feel like he was being true to his roots and his family of origin. And therefore, in that hierarchy of values, he went with that one. That was more important to him than fitting in with the people at work. So these are all fascinating concepts that you can work with when you're a coach, but I hope some take away today and do some of them. So let me give you a few takeaways. Next slide, Chris Whitty. Thank you. So,
I'm sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you. I just thought we've got about another 20 minutes, and then we'll need a few minutes just to wrap up, just to give you a wee time check, just so you know.
Thank you. I think I'm on time. I'm sort of cantering through this a bit now.
All right, thanks, Kim.
Yeah. So I think I've said all this. You know, we listen, we give attention, we challenge assumptions, we don't accept the reality that that person is giving us about themselves, particularly around their limitations. We see them for who they might be. We get them to change perspective and see things from different positions. We work in the here and now. We rehearse, we practice acting as if we already were what we wanted to be. We step into, we say, well, how would someone else do this? And it's amazing when you say to people, how would someone else do it? Move over there and stand in their shoes. How would someone you admire deal with this? It's amazing how people can do it. And I always say it was that easy. You know, you have this huge range of behaviours within you, and we choose from a narrow bandwidth. So we are increasing people's choices and showing them other behaviours that they can have. We ask rather than tell, and we support and challenge equally. So the coaching approaches that we use, next slide, thanks, Chris. The first thing that we do is we create that learning space, we curate that learning space. And in your own ways, whether you're coaches or whether you're Scrum Masters or whether you're Agile coaches, you can still do this. You can still think that when you're working with people, what you're creating is the optimal development atmosphere in which meanings can be played with, considered and understood, where you can challenge and experiment. It's based on a psychologist called Winnicott's concept of a potential space. I love this. It's an area of psychological experience located between wishes and reality, between your inner and outer world. Like, I know Agile people really well now. I can just imagine this being played out somehow. You know, you don't have to do it all the time, but how about setting this frame for a meeting? What might happen? This is what happens, you know, and in a coaching space, this is what happens. A coaching space allows certainties about yourself and others to loosen. Maybe I'm not that, and maybe the organisation isn't that, and maybe it could be more. And it gives rise then to playful reflection and creativity and enables shifts in self-identity. I'm going to let go of that fixed version of who I was or who this team was. And it happens when the space is curated in that way with permission. And the next slide, it reminds us it's not a quick fix either. You don't do this once. This is an attitude. This is a passion. It's a mission, actually, to work with people in this way. So each time we work with someone, this is our mantra. We don't think, yeah, done that, stop smoking, or they've started being more assertive. We're like, are they a bit more capable of mobility? And then I'm going to see them again, and we'll keep building on this and increasing it. Chris, I think we'll skip through those because I think I've already talked about those. Thank you. Keep going, Chris Whitty. Thank you. Okay, let's keep going on the questions. You will have the questions. You don't need me to talk through the questions. I'm going to, do lots of people already know the GROW model? Most people know the GROW model. I would just want to say again, it's actually very beautiful. It's been really misused, overused, turned into some functional, like, you know, gallop through it. It isn't that. It's clever. It is the goal, and the reality is the zone of coaching. That's the place where you need to sit. What's in there? What beliefs are preventing you from having the reality that you want to do? Thanks, Sath. You love the GROW model. So do I, but it takes time, and it takes energy and creativity to really bring it to life. It's a way of having a conversation, for those of you who don't know it, that moves from what do you want to where are you now, through to, well, what things could you do to get there, to a wrap up. I like that, Stuart. Goal and reality about vulnerability. Yeah, they really, really are. And they need to be treated with kid gloves to tease out the differences. So I was going to do an exercise for you, but on these slides, you can take these things away and see that these are things you can do for one another. I'll show the exercise, Chris, because I just want you to be able to go away and use it. Those of you who've done the Barefoot program know this. Those of you who haven't, I want to give you this for to do with a group of people. Just to reinforce the fact that people really can find the right answers if you give them the space to think for themselves. And this is just a set of 10 questions that you ask people all together. So I was going to read them out to all of you and ask you to write your answers individually. It takes you through the GROW model in 10 questions to focus on something you want to move forward. So again, in team meetings, this is probably a more time efficient, creative and productive way of getting people to come up with some great ideas and share them if you all focused on an issue that you needed to move forward in the team. Thanks. Final thing, I'm gonna stop in 5 minutes, is get curious about your team members' motivation. It's everyone motivates themselves differently, and everyone motivates themselves differently in different contexts. So you might be familiar with the McClellan's social values, where some people motivate themselves by affiliation, can be motivated by affiliation, you know, just being liked and being part of the gang. Other team members are motivated by achievements, winning the top performer, and others by making an impact and having some influence. The simple way to get to know what motivates people is to see how they behave and listen to their language, and to see how they respond to the idea, for example, of a prize. We're currently doing a charity walk collectively as a team, and we've decided to offer a trophy for the best, the person that walks the most miles. And you can completely see that has turned loads of people off, and other people are really going for it. But the main thing is, don't give people what you like to get. I always say I give people self-help books and candles for Christmas, and most of them don't like them at all, and I can't begin to understand what they don't like about it. But what we do in present giving is what we do in our attempts to motivate people as well. So people motivate themselves as well, either away from pain or towards pleasure, the carrot or the stick. And the final session that I'm going to share with you is an absolute favourite at Barefoot. Next slide, Chris. And it's called Vision Chairs. And it's an exercise in which we sometimes actually put two chairs in front of ourselves, but we basically imagine that one of those chairs represents us at a point in the future when nothing has changed in a particular context. And we just bring to life in our imagination that person, and we look at them and we think, well, how's that? You know, if everything stays the same, how do I feel about that? And what will I see that's different from now? And then we do exactly the same again in the other chair when we say, well, what do we actually want to see in 5 years' time? And in doing that, we are, you know, triggering the more compelling motivational driver. We're either, you know, really allergically moved from I don't want to be there, or we are highly motivated to I really want to be there and achieve. And one of the key things about this exercise, apart from the identification of towards pleasure away from pain, is the association of our everyday decisions with long-term outcomes. And that's what I'm going to leave you with. The idea that if I keep on doing all the things that I'm doing now and I don't change, is that where I want to be? Is that where I want to be? And how it's those minute, tiny, everyday choices that we kind of delete and then suddenly one day find ourselves going, how did I get here? I remember once, back to Jamie Oliver, but he did a great program about what happens if on the way to work you stop at Starbucks and just get a latte every day, additional to your normal, you know, dietary intake. And it was a colossal amount of weight gain. So this idea about where are these behaviours taking you is something that you can use with teams. And also you can use it as a team to help you plan. Are we going in the right direction? And if not, where do we want to be? On the last couple of slides, you're going to see, let's whiz through to the last one. Chris, whiz through to the last one. On the last slide, you will see all those the coaching cards, Chris. Chris Whitty, where are you? Yeah, all those coaching cards that we produce came about from me doing that exercise. So these can be used for really creative brainstorming ideas too, because I had been at a conference, a CIPD exhibition with a really awful exhibition stand with nothing on it. And I was like, okay, if I'm there next year like that, how will I feel? Let's imagine I'm there in the way that I want to be. And I said, I'll have loads of colourful things that cost about 10 quid that coaches can buy, and they'll all be flocking to the stall. And it really came from that. So, sorry it's been a bit whistle-stoppy, but you do have the slides to take away, and I hope that I have encouraged you to have a go at some of these things. If you want to ask me any questions afterwards, you've got all my contact details there. Thanks for loving the coaching cards, people. And yeah, Atomic Habits is a great book too. Sath and Chris, shall we stop sharing?
Yeah, you can stop sharing here. Some of the slides, yeah, good to see everyone's faces.
Yeah.
Okay, shall I just say a huge thank you to you, Kim? I think the audience have summed it up. They're thanking you. You can see that all coming through now. Lots of, alumni from Barefoot on this session, which is great to see, and some new faces. So we're all very grateful for the time that you've afforded us today and the cross-pollination of your great skill and knowledge. What we'll do is we can share the Barefoot details. So Barefoot have a lot of coaching offering, so from postgraduate certificates right through to standalone kind of modularization of coaching topics. So we'll share that through our pages as well. So Kim, a huge thank you, and we hope to see you again soon.
Thank you all. It's been really great. I would love to have been with you in person, but this is a nice second best. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you. Sath, shall I hand over to you now about future events?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, just to echo Nikki's sentiment there. Fantastic session. Thank you, Kim. Loved it, learned a lot, and yeah, great to see so many of your Barefoot alumni on this session. So yeah, definitely got a fan club.
It's mutual.
So yeah, we've got a lot of great stuff coming up. So some of you have seen it if you're in our LinkedIn group or paying attention to what we've got in Meetup. So really excited for the next one as well. We've got in early May, and Erin Randall will be our guest speaker, and Erin was on tonight. I don't know if Erin's still on, but it was wonderful to see Erin at the start of. So well, Kim's waving to her, so I'm assuming that means yes. I can't see Erin, but I see you get. So yeah, Erin's joining us to a brand new talk that she's. I'm not sure if it's quite finished yet, Erin, but she's certainly working on it. So really looking forward to hosting that one, and it'll be about metaphors and organizational culture and your own story. So that's due to be a very exciting session. And we've got another one kind of nearly quite ready for you in May, but we're not quite finalized. So look out for that. And then we've got Unboxing Exformation with Frances Lalaman. So that's in for June. And also, if you're struggling with OKRs, we've got Mr. Alan Kelly joining us in July. No, it's in June as well for a session. He's recently authored this great book, which I'm really enjoying. So you'll be one of our guests in June. So that's up and available for you to sign up to. And we've rescheduled the session we were going to have with Sheila Walsh. So we sadly had to cancel that one, but we've got that back in the diary. So that's available in July as well. And hot off the presses, Dawn and I were having a conversation yesterday with Dana Larson. So Dana will be doing a session with us later this year. Her diary fills up pretty quickly, so she's not available for a few months, but look out for that as well. So that will be in there for probably kind of late autumn time, we reckon, but waiting to hear back from Dana's team. So pretty exciting stuff coming up. And yeah, we'll keep the program coming and look out for stuff, and great to see everyone. And thanks for joining us. Hope you've enjoyed the session. We will share the slides, we will share the recording, and stay safe and enjoy the rest of your morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you happen to be. And we'll hopefully see you again soon. Thank you, folks. Good to see you. Bye just now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Kim.
Thank you, Kim.